Hi, I'm Ashley.
I'm Hiba.
I'm Catherine.
I'm Michelle.
I'm Stephanie.
Today we're going to talk to you about the Leiter International Performance Scale 3.
So for the domain and type of assessment, the Leiter International Performance Scale 3, also known as LIPS or the Leiter, it's a neurological and cognitive test. It measures intelligence and cognitive abilities. It's a nonverbal assessment. And the Leiter-3 has two categories for tests, cognitive and attention memory. And there are 5 subtests in each category, which brings us to 10 subtests. So history of the development of the Leiter assessment. So the Leiter-3 was written by Royal Miller, Pumplin, and Koch. The publication dates were 1929 to 2013. First introduced in 1929 by Russell Leiter to evaluate the intellectual functioning of the Hawaiian children who had verbal disabilities, and was last edited in 1948 until the Leiter revised in 1997 by Dr. Gail Royd and Lucy Miller. The original Leiter and Leiter revised served as the foundation of Leiter-3. And the original had over 50 subtests, and the Leiter-3 has 10 subtests. The developmental based on input of expert consultation research on behavior rating scales and descriptors of psychological in the literature. Theoretical basis derived from the Kallenhorn-Carroll suggested that intelligence is composed of different abilities that interact and work together to produce an overall individual intelligence.
The Leiter-3 is a standardized assessment that is game-like in administration. It's comprised of manipulatives like blocks, foam pieces, and stimulus cards. It's individually administered by an educator, special educator, SLP, psychologist, and it takes about 20 to 45 minutes to complete. There are 10 subtests divided into 2 categories, cognitive scales and attention memory scales. It takes There's one form of the test, and the subtests primarily measure fluid reasoning, visualization, short-term and working memory, and processing speed. These scales vary depending on age group and are typically broken down between 3 and 5 years old, 6 and 10, and 11 plus. So this test is impressive because it's cited as having no cultural or language bias, meaning the assessment is not influenced by language skills, social, or educational experience. It's completely nonverbal, and the examiner uses only gestures and pantomime to present items. The results include a nonverbal IQ score, an age equivalent, and percentile scores for each subtest.
So the 10 subtests for the Leiter consist of cognitive skills, which are fluid intelligence that include sequential orders, form completion, classification, and analogies, figure ground, matching / repeating patterns. For the attention and memory skills, it includes forward memory, reverse memory, attention sustain, attention divided, and nonverbal shrew. So for the attention and memory skills, it distinguished children with ADHD or other neurological impairments from typical children. They also entail interpretation of the global IQ score by providing valuable diagnostic indicators that help explain scores on the cognitive scales. And in addition to the subtest, the Leiter-3 includes social emotional examining rating scales that allow the examiner to record information about the examinee's attention, activity level, mood, regulation, organization, skills, anxiety, sociability, impulse control, energy, and feelings, and sensory reactivity.
So I'm going to go over a couple examples from the cognitive subtests. The first example I'm going to do is the figure ground. So this is something that's given to the kids. So the participants are shown a photo, and they have to search for it in the embedded figure that's given to them on the easel picture. So this requires the examinee to focus on the detail of the photo and not just a similar shape. So they require the ability to have cognitive flexibility, which is shifting attention between a discrete figure and a complex background. Effective search strategy and freedom from distractibility are required to complete this. So if you look on your bottom left, you'll see a picture of a lizard and a tree, and this is the full picture, and the student or the examinee will be shown the lizard picture or the tree picture, and they will have to find it on the bigger photo. And that's for like the younger kids, but as they get older, it's a little more abstract. They're looking for parts of the photo instead of the whole figure. So like the 2 lemons on the table and the part of the boy's shirt and arm right there and the large lemon right there. And they have to be able to distinguish those from the rest of the stimuli that's going on in this photo. The second example I'm going to give is the cognitive subtest form completion. So this one requires organization of disarranged or fragmented pieces, perceptual scanning, recognition, and the ability to perceive fragmented perceptions as wholes. So working memory permits the examinee to hold both stimuli and possible responses in the mind simultaneously as images are constructed and deconstructed. So if we look at the bottom left, we'll see that these are whole pictures of a sun, ball, dog, and soccer ball, and the pictures that are shown to the students or the examinees are deconstructed, so they are broken up, and they will have to match that and find it in the photo. And as they get older, as seen on the right side, we have shapes that are put together, so they will have to look at this shape and see where it would be up here. So here and here, here and here, and then here and over here. Another example of the cognitive subtest is the classification and analogies. So what this does, it evaluates the examinee's ability to shift and use concepts. So they have to sort items and then use functional classification where the objects that belong together because of usage rather than their size, shape, and color. So it's not just matching, it's a classification on what they do and how they belong together. Like, why do they relate to each other? You perceive the element in question, attach meaning to the element, and conceptualize what the relevant features are that the easel stimuli picture shares with the response. So if we look on the right, we see an apple. They would match it ideally to the banana because they're both foods, and you would eat them. And if we look on the right, we see the bottle. The bottle would most likely go with the baby because the baby will drink the bottle. That's that relationship. Also a shoe, and the foot would go with the shoe because you wear a shoe on your foot. And the last example I'm going to bring you to is of the cognitive subtest is sequential order. So in this one, the participant must understand the relationship between stimuli in order to find that missing element at the end or the middle of the series. So it requires nonverbal reasoning abilities, focus on rule generation related to problems of seriation or sequential information. If we look on the bottom left, we see a small square, a medium square, and then the missing one, which one would go here out of these two. And then it would be on this side, it's a little more abstract where the square is being filled in gradually, and they have to fill in the last 2 pieces, but in the order in which they would be filled.
So this is our video modeling of the figure ground example being used with an administrator and somebody who's taking the test. It's going to begin with the administrator modeling what she's expecting. So she's going to hold up a card, she's going to point to the picture, point to the card, and demonstrate what she's expecting. So as you can tell, there's no sound being played right now. It's a nonverbal test, so there's nothing that you would have to hear. You can see that she's demonstrating by pointing to what is on the card and what's in the picture. And now she's starting with 3 pictures in front of the tester and expecting them to match them to the picture. Next, she's going to move on to another image, and she's going to give the test taker another set of cards and have her do the same thing. She's going to have her match the pictures up to the card. She's not giving any verbal directions. She already gave a modeling example of what was expected. She's going to do the same thing. It's still the figure ground subtest. And as you can see, the test taker's pointing, she's looking, she's trying to match the final example. This final round is a little bit more challenging. If you look carefully, some of the images are harder to find. It is not a full picture. The third card, if you look closely, is actually the wheel to the bottom of the bed. And it took me a little while to try to sit and match because all you see is the line image of the bottom of the bed and the little part of the wheel. So it's starting to get a little bit more challenging. So the way that these tests go is it starts easy and it gets harder as the questions move on.
All right, so that brings us to population and uses. The Leiter-3 can be used for individuals between the ages of 3 to 75 or older years of age, which was said earlier. However, it is the most suitable for individuals who possess one of the following characteristics, either nonverbal, such cognitive delays, speech or hearing impairments, motor impairments, or individuals limited to emerging language arts skills. And that's because this test is so nonverbal and it relies so heavily on gestures and pointing and pantomiming that you don't really need the linguistic skills that you would for other cognitive tests. Also, there's no writing or reading involved like there is for other tests, so you don't need those reading language arts skills. Individuals with the following diagnoses may also be appropriate candidates for Leiter-3. I say may because everyone should be looked at individually, but if you have an individual who has ADHD, traumatic brain injury, English as a second language or English language learners, individuals on the autism spectrum, these are individuals who seem to benefit the most from a cognitive assessment like the Leiter-3. To continue on with appropriate and inappropriate uses, the Leiter-3 is most likely not appropriate for individuals who don't possess the characteristics from the previous slide, so are assessed to have cognitive abilities in the average to above average range. If they've already had a cognitive assessment done on them in the past and they tested in that range, then it wouldn't be appropriate to give this one again at like a triennial or some other kind of diagnostic assessment period. To possess a developmentally appropriate ability to use verbal or expressive and receptive communication skills, or if they have developed reading and writing skills beyond that of an emergent reader. It's not that this test would not give you some indication as to their cognitive abilities, it's just that there's probably other assessments that are more geared toward their level or present level of achievement. The Leiter-3 should only be used to assess cognitive abilities or deficits. It may give insight into atypical behaviors and difficult to assess groups like those on the autism spectrum, but it is not an assessment of ASD and should not be used on its own to assess if a student has or is on the autism spectrum. It should be used in tandem with other assessments to provide a comprehensive report on an individual. Things to consider when administering. So there's 4 main things to consider when administering the Leiter-3. You need space. You should be familiar with the test materials. There is a subtest called the attention divided test subtest, which requires you to be even more prepared because it is very detailed. And there is a gesture laminate sheet that is given to the administrators when the test is provided, the materials are provided to you, which is to help with some of those gestures. So space, the Leiter-3 requires many additional manipulatives and movable parts, as well as room to make gestures and pantomimes appropriately to be creative and to make sure that you're emoting enough that the person that you are giving the gestures to can understand you. For that reason, you need a lot of space. Because of all the necessary gestures that you need to know how to do, you want to be familiar with the gestures, you want to be familiar with the instruction manual, so that you can get your point across that much clearer since you're not using any verbal language. And then the attention divided subtest is very specific in its requirements in order to produce valid results. So for that reason, you should be sure to read those instructions very carefully, very thoroughly, and possibly also practice that part of the subtest a few times before actually administering it to a test taker. The gesture laminate sheet, as I said, is a sheet that has different types of gestures and pantomimes provided on it. It's to streamline the nonverbal cues used to communicate nonverbally with the test taker to make sure that, because this is a standardized test, all gestures are the same or close to the same, so that there's no, the validity of the test can withstand.
So to the reliability and validity of the Leiter-3. So what this study looked at was it looked at the original Leiter, and it looked at the Leiter-R, and it looked at the low functioning children with autism. So why are we looking at this one and not the Leiter-3? It's because that the original Leiter and the Leiter-R are the two foundations for the Leiter-3. There's also very limited study and research on the Leiter-3, so we are using the original ones and the revised one because that's what it was based off of. And if these aren't reliable in itself, then in turn the Leiter-3 would not be reliable. So who was this test on? This study was based on 26 children who were on the autism spectrum disorder. It was at the Yale University Child Study Center as part of a consecutive research referrals. And this study examines the validity of the original Leiter and the Leiter-R within children on the spectrum who could not be assessed with a more traditional measure of intelligence that would normally maybe be seen in regular, typical ed kids or regular schools. And each child was assessed once in the Leiter and once in the Leiter-R. So this was, again, because the Leiter-3 was based off the original, and it's important to assess the validity of those scales. It's also worth noting that this group is only a sample of the range of kids with autism who could be using the Leiter. It doesn't represent every kid, and it was only a very small study. So what did they do? They looked at the mean IQ scores. If we look at the chart in the top right corner, we'll see the mean overall intelligence scores and the standard deviation scores. And you're probably wondering what that means. Well, if we look at the results, so the 22 children who were given both the original Leiter and the Leiter revised had a high and positive correlation for their IQ scores between both of the Leiter and the Leiter-R. So what happened was, on average, there was a 3.73 standard score points higher than the Leiter-R full IQ, meaning that there was a 3-point standard deviation score difference, and it's a small discrepancy. It's really not anything abnormal. Usually, it's easily expected to be plus or minus 5 points on a standard points score. So given both of their standard scores, these kids were very, very close. So the difference between the mean IQs on the two instruments it's not significant. It wasn't one kid scored very low and one kid scored very high. They both scored in generally the same area on both of these tests. So the initial results suggest that the Leiter and the Leiter-R measure similar types of skills and are comparable It also suggests that although the instruments are not entirely comparable on the level of the individual examinee, meaning every kid is different and they all have different needs and they all have different abilities, the two instruments demonstrate adequate concurrent validity and acceptable levels of classification, or the criterion validity in a, I can't see the bottom of that, I'm sorry.
In a
Sorry.
sample of minimally, oh, it just went away.
Thank you.
In a sample of minimally verbal children with autism.
Thank you.
Just a quick overall review of some of the points that we've made. This is the Leiter-3 is a great test, being nonverbal. It's motivating and engaging using the picture cards, the colorful pictures and blocks that are involved. Two of the big weaknesses that we found for the Leiter-3 specifically was that there wasn't a lot of research being posted and reviewed just on the Leiter-3, but we did find quite a bit for the original Leiter and the Leiter-R. And a lot of those aspects were brought into the Leiter-3, which is great. And another weakness was the use of gestures, as it's helpful for those who are nonverbal. Children with autism who are on the autism spectrum disorder have more difficulty with joint attention and eye contact, social cues, and nonverbal communication, which is something for the administrator to think of when giving this test to somebody who has ASD, to make sure that they are able to gauge those gestures and respond appropriately. So for basal and ceiling levels, there is a little bit of information that we could find on this. There are teaching trial items for each age group to assist examiners in identifying people who do or do not understand the nature and expectations of the subtest. So the teaching trial items, where as many as 3 trials are allowed, are very useful in providing some degree of measurement or a basal for those who might have a cognitive delay. They also use a person fit model to emphasize the question of whether the individual's responses are considered consistent. So there might be somebody who answers the lower or the easier questions and gets them wrong, but answers more difficult questions and gets them correct. Any inconsistent responding may be indicative of any one or more of the following. There's lapses in attention, gaps in inabilities, guessing, sleeping, plotting, or quitting, which could vary the results, and the administrator can take that into account when they are assessing and going over the results.
So as a quick wrap up of our research, the Leiter-3 is a neuropsychological nonverbal administration of a standardized test. We put in here the populations, appropriate and inappropriate uses, as well as a quick bullet on validity and readability for you guys. And if you could please take a moment to do our quick quiz, we would really appreciate it. Thank you for your time and feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.